Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance's webinar on implementing cocktails to go. My name is Kirsty Seeloff, and I am the Director of Government Relations for the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance. The Alliance is a coalition of 16 chambers and economic development organizations and over 7,000 member businesses from all across Northern Michigan. Our organization exists to move forward rural-centric business policy. Today, we'll be learning about the recently passed Cocktails to Go law, and we are joined by Sarah Weber, Licensing Director of the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, and David Marvin, Executive Services Director. If you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to go ahead and use the Q&A feature or the chat box to ask questions. We will answer questions when there's a pause in the presentation or at the end, so you're welcome to enter your questions at any time during the presentation. So I will now go ahead and turn it over to our guest.
Hello, thank you. Good morning. We're going to get started here, and I've got a short presentation, and then we can jump into some questions. And so you can see alcohol to go. That's what we're going to talk about today. And it became law on July 1st of 2020. It was Public Act 125 of 2020. It created a completely new section of law, MCL 436-1537A. Again, it went into effect July 1st, and it will be effective until January 31st of 2025, unless the legislature extends that or leaves it or deletes what we call a sunset provision somewhere along the lines. But that was a negotiated thing with the governor's office to make sure that we could make sure that everything was running well with it and not just have it open-ended without being able to grab some data and figure out if it's working or it's not working, or there's things that we need to tweak along the line. So you do see that from time to time in legislation. We don't get that a lot in liquor control code legislation, so it is something that we will be keeping our eyes on, and we're going to be looking at data to make sure that the alcohol to go is working well, and that if there needs to be any changes made along the way, we can do that. So before we get into it, I wanted to show you a fun photo. This was literally 3 days after this law was put into place. I was on my way to the Upper Peninsula and saw this giant sign. I had to stop and get a picture. This sign, well, you can see how big it was. They were very, very proud that this restaurant was able to sell their alcohol to go, and we're getting in on the deal very quickly, as I know a number of licensees have throughout the state. And so as we talk about this, the big issue is it's not just cocktails to go. I know that's the kind of the catchphrase that we've used and has been bantered around. And if you look anything up, if you're to search on Google, that's pretty much what you're going to hear. In some other states, it really was just cocktails to go, mixed drinks. In Michigan, though, it was more than that. Prior to the change of this law, the only alcohol that could be sold to go was from what we call off-premises licensees. And that was beer, wine, and spirits if you had an SDD or an SDM license. But you couldn't sell drinks to go of any sort if you were an on-premises licensee, like a bar or a restaurant or hotel. A bar, a restaurant, or hotel, depending on the license type they had, could have had an SDM license, a specially designated merchant license, which would have allowed them to sell beer and wine in its original container to go to be consumed off the premises. So if you had a restaurant that had a pickup, let's say you had a pizza place that had dining inside that has alcohol sales, but also you do a lot of to-go sales with that, you could sell beer and wine, a 6-pack or a bottle of wine to go with that pizza. So that pretty much was all you had for retailer licensees up till this law came into place. But when the law came into place, it applies to all alcoholic liquor. And alcoholic liquor under Michigan law contains beer, wine, spirits, mixed drinks, cocktails. We have a product called a mixed spirit drink product, which is essentially low alcohol content mixed spirit drink products. So like your wine coolers and stuff like that. So this law is a lot more than just cocktails. You could walk into a bar or restaurant and get a beer to go under this if they did not have an SDM license. And that beer would have to be poured into a container. And we'll get into the qualified container requirements here in a moment. But it does include more than just mixed drinks as the traditional cocktail concept. So that is something that was a little bit wider ranging than what some other states have. And so most of what's happening is it really is cocktails. People want mixed drinks to go, and that's a lot of what they're getting. But you could do wine and beer or just straight spirits. But that is something a little bit more wide ranging than I think a lot of people realized. So any of the alcohol that is being sold under this cannot be in the original unopened container. Again, getting back to the off-premises licenses like SDDs and SDMs, they are only allowed to sell alcohol in the original unopened container. Under the alcohol to go, it cannot be in the original container, and it must be filled into a qualified container. And again, in a moment, we'll talk about what a qualified container is. And so you can't just uncap a bottle of beer and hammer the cap back on and seal it and say, hey, there's your to-go container. You would have to literally fill a container and send it home with them. And then the qualified container cannot be filled in advance of a sale. So you might have some bars and restaurants will mix up, let's say, margaritas, and they'll have a large container that they'll have, and then they'll fill drinks from that. They could do that, but what they couldn't do is have multiple containers filled already to go. It would have to be as the customer come in and say, hey, I want a margarita to go. They would then fill that container that they would seal and then send it with me. So ultimately what it is the intention is that it's a sale by sale type situation. So it's not something where you're making up vast quantities of this, whatever the drinks are, to have there and essentially market as an off-premises type situation. The intention always has been that it's alcohol that would otherwise be consumed on the premises that will then be sold under these circumstances to go. A qualified container, that's a lot of verbiage there. I'll leave that up there, but I'll go into a little bit of detail on it. It has to be clean, it has to be sealable, and it has to primarily be for the purposes of it to be a to-go type of drink. Can't be any larger than a gallon. Most of what we're seeing are much smaller. Most cocktails are, a gallon would go a long ways, and I don't even want to know what some of those would cost at that point if you had that large of a container. And then once it is filled, it has to be sealed with a device or a material that is used to fully close off the container securely with no perforations or straw holes. So you can't just fill essentially like a coffee container that has perforations at the top, put that on the top and hey, say that's good. I'll have a picture here in a moment of one that we all really liked. I know it's not something that everybody can do, but there are some pretty unique situations out there. And ultimately what the intention is so that when it leaves the premises, we know that if local law enforcement pulls somebody over or see somebody on the street that's carrying one of these containers, that they know that the licensee ultimately made sure it was secure. Now, you can never tell what somebody's going to do once they leave the premises, whether they pop it open and drink it or stick a straw in it. But the intention behind this language was to get away from making it convenient to drink it immediately and just walk out the door and stick a straw in it and walk down the street drinking it. So the intention was really to make it a fairly secure container. But that doesn't mean it has to have bells and whistles to a certain extent. The one that I'm going to show you here that we all liked was quite an interesting thing. The top at the top is very similar to like a milk jug or a orange juice jug, where it has a when you twist the cap off, it breaks the seal, so it was secure on there. And then they even went a step further and put like a tamper-proof piece of some sort of sticker that when it ripped fairly easily, but it was very clear that you had ripped it open. And it was, my wife and I tried to peel it off just for the sake of testing it to see it, and it would not peel off without it starting to rip. So we're not saying that you have to go that far, but this is an idea that is really secure and really meets the requirements of the law. It's secure, it's been sealed, it has no perforations or air holes, and you can tell that it's been sealed, and there's no doubt about that. I've searched a little bit online, and there are a number of licensees that are doing similar containers, not going as far as having the little tamper-proof sticker on them. Some of these licensees that are manufacturers actually are repurposing some of their bottles that they have. They're clearly marking them as alcohol to go, and they're sealing them with a more temporary seal at the top, as opposed to what they would seal a normal bottle of alcohol with. And so they meet the requirements. They're sealable, they're clean, they're no more than a gallon, they're sealed at the top, there's no perforations, and they go from there. Now, the interesting thing is there's no labeling requirement for alcohol to go if it is me, the customer, coming in and picking it up. We'll get a little bit to that in a moment, but I just wanted to, you can see there's no label on here other than the sticker at the top, which isn't really a label. So the qualified licensees that can do this, it's kind of broken down into a couple different categories, and there's a reason for that. Number one, we want to make sure that any licensee that was able to sell alcohol for consumption on the premises would also be included in this. And the original draft of the bill wasn't as clear on that. It almost left out some of our manufacturing licensees that sell alcohol on the premises. So we worked with the legislature to get that cleared up. So the traditional retailer licenses are the ones at the top there, the on-premises retailer licenses. So Class Cs, which are probably the most common of our licenses. Tavern licenses, which are a little less common. Class Cs allow for beer, wine, and spirits. Taverns are only beer and wine. There's only a handful of A hotels. We got probably about 500 B hotels in the state. Club licenses, which are like your Lions, your KFC, your veterans organizations, Moose, those kind of fraternal and service organizations. They can sell beer, wine, and spirits, but only to their own members. So they could sell alcohol to go under this law, but only to their people. Me, not being a member of the local Moose Club, I couldn't come in and purchase any alcohol to go. And the same thing with a G1. A G1 is a member-only golf course that they can sell beer, wine, and spirits. And again, they could sell to their members only. And then manufacturers that have tasting rooms at the location where they manufacture can do this. And then also off-premises tasting rooms or joint off-premises tasting rooms where they can sell drinks essentially to go of the products that they manufacture. So if they're a microbrewer, they could do beer to go. They can also do growlers, which was already allowed. So beer is probably not really new for the microbrewers. Wine, if they wanted to fill a to-go container of wine, and then spirits, obviously, spirits, and then mixed drinks based off of those spirits. So that it's pretty much any licensee that can sell alcohol for on-premises consumption can do this. There's not a lot of limitations on that. Now, if they're an SDM or an SDD license, they can only sell alcohol in its original package to go, and not like this. So this does include about 8,500 licensees. So it's a fairly large number of licensees in Michigan that can do this. And then not only does it allow for alcohol to go, but it also allows delivery under certain circumstances. So where we talked about there's no label required on a to-go container if it is something where I, the customer, am coming in to pick it up. There is a label that is required if it is something where it is being delivered. And that's the language right up there, verbatim out of the law. Contains alcohol, must be delivered to a person 21 years of age or older. So that would have to appear on a label or on the container somewhere before it is delivered. Now, who can deliver? That's where it gets a little trickier, and that's kind of why there was that bifurcated on-premises retailers versus manufacturers. An on-premises retailer licensee, so one of those licensees that we had listed there, their employee may deliver the qualified container of the alcohol to the customer at their home or designated location. Or there is what we call a third-party facilitator service licensee, which up until this point has been primarily only been utilized by the off-premises license types. If you've ever been to, I think it's shipped through Meijer, and I think Target uses Ship Now. Kroger, can't think of what Kroger does. And there's a couple other, I mean, Grubhub, I think, has one of these licenses. There's only maybe 10 third-party facilitator service licensees in the state. So it's not something that is a widespread option out there. But a third-party facilitator service licensee could also deliver the container on behalf of the on-premises retailer. But that is only, again, that top list that we talked about, all of the retailers specifically. If you go down to the manufacturers that have tasting rooms or their own tasting room, I mean, the tasting room permits or the licenses, only their employees may deliver the qualified container to the customer. There is a variety of legal reasons that is there. There's some issues with out-of-state entities and consumer protection and the commerce clause that we could take a whole hour just to discuss, but we won't, as to the reason why that's not allowed there. But manufacturers still have the option of having their employees deliver the qualified container to the customer. Again, it can't be, if I'm a winery, it can't be a full bottle of wine that's not been uncorked. It can't be a full bottle of beer that's been uncorked. It can't be a full bottle of spirits that's not been opened. It has to be something that's poured into the container. So there are some manufacturers that may not do that on their premises. They may have some limited tasting. So it would have to be something where they would be willing to do that, but they could deliver at that point in time. So it does offer more than just the sales to go. So far, I've heard mostly of just the sales to go, but I'm sure there's probably people out there that are doing the delivery. We just haven't got as much of feedback on those. So that is the overarching presentation of this. I wanted to throw that out there, give you a kind of a quick overview, and I assume we're probably going to get plenty of questions, and that's where I think probably the rest of our time is probably best invested at this point.
Great, thank you, David, and thank you, Sarah. So for everyone who's on the webinar right now, if you would please enter any questions that you have in either the chat feature or the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and get through those. So we'll give you a couple minutes to go ahead and answer or to enter your questions. And David, while we're waiting for any questions that we might have from our attendees, can you talk about any frequently asked questions or any issues that you've seen with implementation?
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind here, I'm going to get to our website real quick and share my screen again. And I can show you where you can go. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. This is our website. You can see the website address up here. That's actually don't try to type all that in. I'll give you the simple website. It's michigan.gov/LCC for Liquor Control Commission. Don't put MLCC in there. We call ourselves the MLCC, but when they set up the URL for our website, they drop the M. So it's michigan.gov/LCC. This will take you to our website. It will, if it's on a a mobile device, what it'll do is it will shrink everything down. So you'll see this section at the top, and then this will be right below it. But on a regular computer screen, you'll see this right here. We have a handy dandy link that you can click on right there. Now what that will do is open up a PDF. So I would have to share a different screen, which I will do here in a moment, because I don't think, can anyone see my PDF?
No.
Okay, so I have to share it differently here. So I'm going to stop the share and share it like this. And then you should be able to see the PDF now.
Yes.
It has a little for people who are more graphic, learn that way through pictures. There's some little check marks here of you can see the alcohol to go, and then the alcohol in its original container, and it has check marks for which kind of license types can sell and deliver. It then goes on to talk about the alcohol to go, and then it talks about growlers. It also talks about off-premises consumption, so our SDDs and our SDMs that can sell. So it's kind of a wide-ranging document, but it's a handy-dandy thing that kind of combines a number of things there, and talks a little bit more in detail and gives you the actual little more legal terms for things like this. But really, this chart at the top has been very helpful. People can see it and go, oh, okay, I'm a Class C license. I may sell and deliver to customers beer, wine, mixed spirit drinks in a qualified container. Not much more that I have to know there, except for if I am delivering it, I've got to make sure that it has that label on there about containing alcohol. So that is something that's fairly easy to look at. We do not have a standalone frequently asked question page for that, other than that document there, because we get a few questions here and there. Primarily, what the ongoing question is, what's a sealable container? And what we will say is, the law says it is a container that's sealed by the licensee or their employee, that doesn't have perforations or air holes, and is sealed so that it's fully sealed. And I mean, we can't really put more words into what and say this is what the legislature intended outside of the language that's there. I had the example that was up there that everybody, all of our people that looked at it said, wow, that's that really cool one. But there are people that have to-go cups that have a top that fits on the top that doesn't have perforations or air holes in it, that they put tape over it or something along that lines. As long as it's sealed and it's not allowing alcohol to escape, for the most part, that's going to, in many cases, that's about all that a lot of licensees are going to do. Some are going to invest in the type of equipment and the products that to do the type of bottle that I showed on the picture. Others aren't going to want to go that far. So there is some leeway in the law, as long as it's meeting, for the most part, the definition that is in that law.
Sure. Thank you for those resources. We did get one question. I know it was answered on the back end of the webinar, but I just wanted to repeat it for everyone on the webinar today. So we had an attendee say, we have one of the Traverse City DDA Class C licenses that is tied to our location. Does that count as a normal Class C license for this law?
Yes. So under the law, Class C licenses are Class C licenses. How you got the license, it's a DDA license, and that's the mechanism you had to go by to get the license, and it has a lot to do with whether or not that license can transfer to somebody else in another location, but it is treated as a normal Class C license. So a resort Class C, a DDA Class C, a redevelopment Class C. There's some special act Class Cs out there. So there's a number of variety of ways you can get a Class C license or a tavern license or a B hotel license.
I think there's a question too, with regard to some of the DDA licenses as well, because the Class C license doesn't have any restrictions. However, some of the original DDAs that were issued prior to this new section of law didn't allow for takeout sales of beer and wine to be added on to, in addition to the Class C license. So I don't know if maybe that's where part of the question kind of came into play, because we do still have some of those out there too.
Yeah, and I think,
but it wouldn't impact the Class C.
yeah, no, and even the ones, the handful of the original development licenses, and I'm just pulling that up on my screen right now, indicated that you could not have a license issued to it that allowed for the off-premises consumption. And I'm just looking at it here real quick. I'm not going to find it. It's a long list there, and I'm going to.
I think it's under 1521. 1521.4, I believe, is what it's under.
Okay, there we go.
Restricts
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and so ultimately it still is, they're still selling alcohol technically for consumption on the premises that is being packaged up to go, essentially. And it, yeah, and that's really, so I could see where there may be some confusion on the handful of licenses that are like that. But I don't think there's that many out there still existing, so.
Well, I'm gonna put out a final call for questions. Looks like we have one that just came in through the Q&A box. And if you have any questions, please take this as an opportunity for final call. It looks like we just have one. So go ahead and enter your questions in the chat feature or the Q&A box. So the next question that we have is, I have an add-on to my license that allows me to sell beer to go. Will I be required to renew this license?
You want to take it or you want to Yeah, the SDM license allows for beer and wine for to-go sales. So if they wanted to come into the restaurant and buy a bottle of wine and take that with them unopened, they could do so. That license does need to be renewed on a yearly basis, and it's different from the cocktails to go. So if you want to keep it and you want to have that ability to sell beer or wine in its original container, then you will want to renew that.
Just allowing for a few more moments for any additional questions. And David and Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We'll allow you to leave us with any final words while we wait for any further questions.
If anybody ever has any questions, you can contact our office. Our phones are open again. Everybody is back online, and we still have our email addresses open as well for general questions.
And again, that's right at the top of our website. It's got the toll-free number and then those email addresses for the general questions.
Great. Well, thank you. That concludes our webinar for today, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Bye-bye.